man must do his bit.
Hi, hello, and welcome to another edition of The Public Interest. I'm Gabriela Patram. We're so happy that you can join us. Joining me is former President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana and lead of the People's National Congress Reform, Mr. David Granger. Sir, welcome. It's always a pleasure to have you, to sit down with you and discuss the national issues.
Thank you, Gabby. It's a pleasure to be back.
Great. Sir, today we want to discuss environmental security and national unity. Guyana is preparing to attend the UN Climate Change Conference, also known as COP26, next week, or participate in that conference. My first question is, how valid are the elements of our national strategy for this conference?
It is difficult to answer that question fully or accurately because most Guyanese only became aware of what is likely to be a national presentation to Glasgow yesterday, on the Thursday the 28th of October, when they heard the broadcast for the first time. And that broadcast was really, it only promised to launch a consultation. So it meant that a document has already been produced, which has not been the subject of consultation with the public. So we don't know what's in the document. We know what we were told on Thursday, and it is quite disappointing that everyone knew that COP26 was coming up, but to be told at this point in time that it is the start of a consultation rather than the end of a consultation. It should be the culmination of weeks and months of consultation. But no, so it means that the document which will be presented does not have the validity or the credibility because we haven't agreed to it. It was just put on the table there, and only now the discussion will start. I'm sure there will be discussion, people will be interested. So it is dilatory in the sense that why wait till 48 hours or 96 hours before the conference to say what presentation will be put in the name of the Guyanese people? It is deficient. There are many gaps, there are many holes, there are many unanswered questions. And we're deliberately deceptive because we could have been told before what the elements were. I don't doubt that what has been presented is necessary. I don't see anything that is not subject to discussion, is not cast in stone, but it is not sufficient. There are too many gaps that need to be filled. In sum, what can I say? The lack of consultation is a serious deficiency. And I put environmental security almost at the same level as territorial security. Just as Guyanese need to be prepared, need to be informed, need to be educated about the Venezuelan claim on our territory, and we have been for the last 55 years or longer. We need to know what is the impact of climate change on our environment. So the territorial security is almost on the same level as environmental security. And it is very disappointing that the government of Guyana should wait until, literally a few hours before going to Glasgow to put this presentation on the table and say, here, this is what we're going to say. We have not discussed it. We don't know whether the people of Guyana agree with its contents, and we don't know the outcome. Maybe when the presentation is made, then the real consultation will start. And I think they say it's going to be a 3-month consultation. But people may also almost say, well, what's the point? You've already decided what you're going to do. Why ask us now if you've already done what you want to do? It's almost an insult.
Sir, in 1992, Guyana signed the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change at the United Nations Conference on Environment and Development. What progress has there been in environmental security since that event?
There has been significant progress. I would say that even before the series of meetings started, President Desmond Hoyt at the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Malaysia, a place called Langkawi, made a declaration which again took some people by surprise. And we call it the Langkawi Declaration. In fact, there was a Langkawi Declaration, but at that conference at Langkawi, he announced that Guyana would present a part of its territory, I think bigger than Malta, bigger than the country of Malta, dedicated to environmental research and the development of biodiversity and other technologies. So even before the UN series started, Guyana was making itself prepared for environmental security. Since then, we have been mainstreaming the environment, and I benefited a lot from the UN process because that helps. It's a sort of report card that every year COP would measure the progress being made towards, reduction of threats, reduction of risks, and the big threat now is climate, and we are not. The world is not maintaining the level of discipline that is needed to bring climate change under control, and it has given Guyana an opportunity to measure its own performance and to adjust all of its policies, not only environmental policy but also infrastructural policies, educational policies, developmental policies, to ensure that we do not fall below what is regarded as international best practice. And it has been very helpful, and it has helped Guyana to adjust its policies, not just spending money. It is spending money in a prudent way to make sure that we do not damage the environment. So it deals with solid waste, it deals with coastal zone management, it deals with flood control. It is a total policy. And we need to keep abreast with the United Nations, and we need to follow COP very seriously, and we need to treat it with greater respect than I think is being treated at present. It's very important to Guyana's survival.
So still on environmental security, how can Guyanese collaborate to enhance environmental security? I ask that because climate change, as you just mentioned, which is a front burner issue, has affected Guyana's ecology, the economy, security, and society. So how can we collaborate as a people?
Well, because of the totality of environmental stewardship, I felt it was necessary to have an institutional basis. And before our coalition administration, there was no coherent approach. I mean, there were elements, but I call these, like silos. I created a department of the environment so that, protected areas, climate change, EPA, biodiversity, all of these things would come under a single department which could plan coherently. And it was a good thing that it was done. But in terms of environmental policy, if you are going to bring along the whole nation, education, information, and so on, you need to ensure that these policies get into the education system, get into the ministries of housing and infrastructure. So everything is done in accordance with a coherent environmental strategy. And then people start to become conscious of the necessity for environmental behavior, whether it's litter, whether it's maintaining city fences, whether it's our rivers, whether it's solid waste management. So by mainstreaming and by having a department of government, I know the government has shut down a lot of departments, the Department of Citizenship, the Department of Social Cohesion, but thank God they've kept the Department of the Environment, and that is an important element in ensuring that there is greater cohesion at the national level, that it gets into the education system, and that we could be better prepared. We ought to have been better prepared to go to Glasgow, because implementation is centrally controlled, and of course the regional system would assist in ensuring that residents in all of the regions are aware of the policies. Environment is not a coastal problem, it is a national problem, and it has to be implemented at the national level.
And sir, Guyana's environment, it is made up of the coastland, the grasslands, the highlands, islands, wetlands, the rainforests, the rivers, the waterfalls, and lakes. However, these areas are vulnerable to climate change. So how can we as a people, again, Guyanese, or what can we do to mitigate the adverse impacts of climate change?
Many persons, even in Guyana, are unaware of the complexity of our landscape. You know, Guyana is a country, but it is a country of varied landscapes. People living on the coast may be surprised to know that there's only one rainy season in Rupununi, one long dry season, one rainy season. It's just a small point. But, life in the savannas is different from life on the coastline. We need to protect our wetlands, where we call them swamps, but they are particular snakes or birds or fish which are part of our whole ecological system. We need to protect our grasslands. We need to protect our forests. There are different types of forests. The mangrove forests, of course. I see now that the foreign countries are getting involved in giving instructions on how we are to safeguard the mangroves. We know about the mangroves. If you cut down the mangroves, it will that will lead to coastal erosion. So all types of forests, the montane forests in the mountains, the wet forests, the mangrove forests, and the rainforests are all important to us. So we need to look at the complexity of Guyana's territory. And this has helped, or this should help, to get us away from this coastal mentality. When we speak of drainage and irrigation, we only think of the coast. We only think about sugar and rice. But as we discovered in April and May and June, and I don't think the government has given the nation a benefit of a proper report, flooding took place in all 10 regions. And it means that if we talk about environmental security, we're talking about a countrywide phenomenon, and it means that we must think of the lakes, we must think of the rivers, we must think of the it's a one system. It's one system. And because Guyana is part of the continent, it is influenced by systems in other countries. For example, flooding in Rupununi is influenced by what happens in the Amazon region of Brazil. Sometimes it's dry on the coastline. It might even be dry in the Rupununi, but flooding takes place because of the weather patterns in a neighboring country. So the complexity of our landscape is something that has often been ignored by a coast-bound government, coast-bound, even academics, coast-bound education system. And very frequently, people are surprised at the scale of catastrophe in some hinterland areas. For example, during the floods earlier this year in April, May, people could not believe that water had risen 4 meters at Kokwani, and people had to vacate their homes for long periods. But it is true. These are things I've seen. I've driven around Lethem in a motorboat, because of floods in 2012. So we need to do a lot more geography, but we need to have a better understanding of this country that we call our own, because it's much more, it's not a little island somewhere, with one, climate, one geography. It is very complex. And we need to have an articulated response to the geographical and environmental characteristics of our own country.
Sir, Guyana Protected Area System accounts for 8.4% of its landmass. What is the Protected Areas System role in environmental security?
Largely, it is one of protection of biodiversity. As you mentioned a few minutes ago, we're talking about wetlands, we're talking about grasslands, you're talking about islands, you're talking about the Essequibo Islands. When I was in government, I had started the process of creating regional protected area systems. So every region would have a protected area. Of course, the protected area system in Region 9 would be different from the one perhaps in Region 4, where we have swamps, the protected areas in Region 2, where we have lakes, would be different from that in Region 5. So the protected area system, in fact, there are only about 5 official protected areas. I think the Kanuku, Kaicho, but there needs to be protected areas in coastal regions as well. There are 10 regions, and every region should have its own PAS, because the biodiversity is different, and we have to look at Guyana in a holistic way, not in a matter of we are just looking at 1 or 2 crops or 1 or 2 regions. We have to realize that no region is an island, and what happens in one region affects another. So, for example, during the rains, the catastrophic rain, which the government itself declared was the worst environmental disaster between roughly April and July this year, there were areas in say, the Mahaica-Berbice region which continued to be flooded even after the rains had ceased, because they were affected by waters maybe coming from Region 4 or from the East Demerara Water Conservancy. So I think the protected area system is important because it will give regional democratic councils, regional chairmen, an opportunity to think environmentally. Not just to be bound to the offices on the coast, but to think of the whole region as an environmental or ecological unit. And go up the creeks, go up the rivers, go into the savannas and see how the people live. Look at the vegetation, look at the animals. And it also gives them an opportunity for ecotourism, so that they can think of developing, tourist products. For example, you can go up to Maracaibo or to St. Cuthbert's and do birding. You can go to Rupununi and maybe look at the tapirs or the anteaters. So that type of ecotourism, could be done even on a regional basis. So I think the PS system is important. It plays a role in protecting our biodiversity, and it helps to make all Guyanese in all regions more conscious of the fragility of our environment and the necessity for the regional administrations. And I put a lot of emphasis on the regions. I created 4 regional tongues to manage these regions better, so that they would take responsibility for their respective regions, not only administratively but also environmentally.
Sir, can we talk a little bit now about the Guyana Shield, and that is GUI ANA. Guyana is at the center of this shield, a region for pristine rainforest. How important is the shield to Guyana's, and that's GUI ANA, environmental security?
It is a blessing. I call it a sort of South American Garden of Eden. We are very fortunate, and Guyana, there are 6 countries, maybe if you wish you can say more than 6, but there are 6 countries that are thought to share the Guyana Shield. from the west, you have Colombia, part of Colombia. Then you have Venezuela. You have the whole of Guyana, the whole of Suriname, the whole of Guyana, part of northern Brazil. It is really a gift of nature, and those of you who are religious will probably say it's a gift of God. But in terms of fresh air, fresh water, it is something that has to be preserved and protected. Let me tell you an anecdote. A diplomat once came to tell me that he was traveling, when he was in government, of course. He was going home for holiday, and about 2 weeks later I saw him back. I said, you back so quick? He said, yes, I had to come back. I said, why you came? He said, fresh air. Fresh air. I don't want to tell you which country he represented, but people enjoy Guyana because they have fresh air, fresh water, and a largely unspoiled landscape. And of course, a lot of damage has been done because of reckless mining, reckless logging, reckless disposal of waste, the use of mercury in some of our riverine areas, and we need to prevent that type of damage. So, as part of the Guyana Shield, I was a bit frustrated that it's hard to get the cooperation of 6 countries, and I believe we need a longer period of effort working together. Brazil used to be a leader in environment in this northern tier of South America, but I think there have been some changes there, and of course the pandemic and so on. But there needs to be greater collaboration among these 6 countries, and Guyana is the heart, and at the heart of Guyana is Irokrama, and I always saw Irokrama as being the heart of the Guyana Shield. But it is a world-class phenomenon, and you can call it the lungs, or part of the lungs of the earth. We have the earth to breathe, and that is why there is so much interest in cutting down the forest, or so much concern in cutting down forests, and in what's been happening in other parts of the Amazon, forest fires and so on. I always tell the story of an Amerindian proverb that the trees hold up the sky. If you cut down the trees, the sky will fall, and that is something we need to remember in the Guyana Shield, that the trees hold up the sky, and if we keep on cutting down the trees, the sky is going to fall one of these days.
Sir, Guyana has been a groundbreaker in global environmental protection throughout the series of United Nations climate change conferences. What have been our experiences in enhancing environmental security?
It has been a good experience. One can say that we woke up a little late to the realization of the importance of the environment, to what I now call the good life. And it came late, but perhaps it's a good thing that it did come, because we were able to conceptualize what I call the Green State Development Strategy, and emphasize the importance of clean air, clean water, and maintaining our landscape. Those three, air, earth, and water, are very important to existence. From time immemorial, people always spoke about that. Now, in terms of policy and policy making, we are a groundbreaker, because at the Commonwealth, it was President Hoyt who made that declaration at Langkawi, and as a result of that, the Commonwealth bought into Irokrama. I think later on we had some financial difficulties at the Commonwealth, and we have not been able to attract a consistent level of financing, but it is Guyana's responsibility, it's Guyana's territory, and it was groundbreaking then. And in later years, people recognized Guyana's primacy in environmental stewardship around the world. Guyana is recognized not only as part of the Guyana Shield and because of our flora and fauna, but because of the leadership that has been given by presidents of this country around the world. So that is very important. It has been groundbreaking, and we should maintain that tradition of giving leadership to neighboring countries, to the Caribbean, and to the world at large about the importance of the environment.
Sir, you mentioned just now the Green State Development Strategy. The coalition, the APU and AFC coalition, published the Green State Development Strategy. However, the PPP administration has reworked the Low Carbon Development Strategy 2030. Why is the GSDS is a more effective strategy than the LCDS?
This it looks a bit like shadow boxing. It is true that the PPP administration, I think maybe around 2009, introduced the Low Carbon Development Strategy, the LCDS. Many people saw it as a commercial deal rather than an environmental development strategy. It was certainly inadequate. And when I got in the government, we decided that we needed a holistic environmental strategy. And we developed the Green State Development Strategy, which incorporates some of the elements of the Low Carbon Development Strategy, but it also mainstreamed environmental concerns in most other areas, so that, as I mentioned earlier in our discussion this morning, every single area of government must have a green component, particularly infrastructure, transportation, aviation, education. Everything must be green, symbolically green, in terms of not damaging nature, not damaging the environment, and respecting biodiversity. Mining, everything has to be governed by some concept of protection and preservation. So there ought to be no conflict. It's not a matter of who owns LCDS, who owns GSDS. Because what has happened now, as of yesterday, the 28th of October, the government has thrown away the name GSDS, and they have created this LCDS 2030, which, I mean, basically, it has adopted a lot of the ideas in the Green State Development Strategy. And it has also adopted my concept that development must be planned on a 10-year basis. So they're talking about 2010 to 2030, which last year, 2020, I announced the 10-year development plan. But now they've announced a 10-year development plan. They're calling it LCDS 2030. So imitation is a form of flattery, but there's no need to invent the wheel all over again. There's no need for the PPP to, reject everything simply because it came from the APNU AFC. Let us look at both the LCDS and the GSDS and see to what extent, these strategies could be merged for the good of Guyana, for the good of the environment. As I see it, the LCDS is opportunistic. It's commercial. Nothing wrong with making money. But the GSDS, the Green State Development Strategy, is holistic in its approach. And this is what we need to do over the next 10 years. And when people study the presentation that the Guyana delegation will make in Glasgow, they will see that it contains a lot of what the Green State Development Strategy has called for. What's in the name? If it's good for Guyana, it's a good strategy.
Sir, Guyana is now known as the oil-producing country. on that note, will petroleum production compromise environmental security?
Yes, yes. You can't make an omelette without breaking the egg. But we need. It is a bit of an embarrassment. I announced National Petroleum Day in December 2020, 2019, I think. 2019 when I was president, because I wasn't president in December 2020.
Right.
So there's something called NPD in December, and dirty energy pollutes. There's no running away from it, and there are now hearings in the United States government, and we need now to manage that industry. It cannot be stopped completely. It cannot be reversed. It now needs to be managed, and we need to measure the way the industry develops to ensure that damage is not created. It's like mining. We will continue to produce gold. We've been producing gold for 120 years, and it damages the environment, but we still continue. We've been producing timber, it damages the environment, yes, but we must manage it in a sustainable way. And to some extent, the fact that the petroleum production is offshore will give us an opportunity to think critically how that industry could be managed. It will be brought to an end. It wouldn't last forever, and that is the reason why I said this thing has got to last for 10 years. And that is why I announced this, decade of development, because by 2030, the situation in the oil industry would have changed drastically. So I was thinking ahead when I announced this decade of development. But yes, it is. I won't call it an embarrassment. They said embarrassment maybe, but there is a contradiction. Okay. You cannot, preserve and pollute at the same time. But you have to manage it, and let us think first about people and think about the environment before we think about profits.
Sir, as we wrap up, my final question to you. You represented Guyana at several international environmental conferences under your tenure as president. How significant was presidential participation at these conferences?
People listen to you. It is important, and if you send, a junior person, they probably wouldn't even get a chance to speak. But I have been able to go to India to speak at the International Solar Alliance. I've been to Brazil, I've been to Kenya, I've been to Vietnam, I've been to Switzerland. These are important because the countries listen to you and they help you, they provide assistance, and it is part of our strategy. You can't be silent and expect to get support from the international community. So the president is the voice of the nation. When I go to United Nations, I speak about the environment and people listen. When I go to these countries, I speak. When I go to international organizations, I speak for the country. And the voice of a president, the opinion of the president would carry greater weight. And throughout my presidency, I've always emphasized the importance of environmental security, and at the same time emphasized the importance of national unity, so that the nation will support our drive for environmental security. The two go together. And in speaking to the international community, in every aspect of my presidency, I emphasize the importance of national unity and environmental security.
Well, sir, like I always end the program by saying, it's always a pleasure to sit down and chat with you. So I hope that we'll have you back very soon. So thank you very much again, sir. And to you, our viewers, we say thank you very much for joining us. I am Gabriela, Patram, and on behalf of all of us here at TPI, we do encourage you to continue to follow our COVID-19 guidelines. Goodbye.